Feststuhl, and this is the wonderful Marilyn Manson on my show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Did you plan your last 3 albums to be a trilogy right from the beginning?
When I wrote Antichrist Superstar, it was inspired by a dream of kind of seeing myself where I am today.
Yeah.
So when I finished it, I knew to make that dream come true, I had more work to do personally and musically. So I started working my way backwards to the beginning after that. So in a sense, the story wrote me. I didn't sit down and think I was going to do it, but then I felt compelled to.
Yeah, and at the time of Antichrist Superstar, did you already roughly know what Hollywood was supposed to sound like, or what sort of theme it was supposed to have?
In a sense, but in another way, things kind of worked on a subconscious level. But the story that goes through it was all in my head, but at the same time, it ended up becoming autobiographical. So I don't know who wrote this, you know, if the story wrote me or if I wrote the story. So it became kind of...
So lots of things happen in the studio. You're not a sort of a control person that knows exactly what's going to happen before you go to a studio.
With this record in particular, I had a very clear vision, and that's why I produced it myself, because I knew how I wanted everything to sound. I spent 3 months locked away by myself, just writing what would become the lyrics, and eventually what I turned into my novel that I'm going to put out next year, which is also called Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I knew every detail of how I wanted everything to sound, so this record was the easiest to make. It took a while, only because I had a lot of detail to put into it.
Yeah, and I realized that this album now sounds much more disturbing and sort of, how do you call it, that mixes up your feelings much more than Mechanical Animals. Why would you say is that so?
Well, if I could describe how the 3 tie together, it's a story about, much like Adam in the Bible, someone who is very naive and innocent in a way, and wants to fit into this world that doesn't really want him. And they spend their whole life fighting to fit into this world, this perfect world, which I called Hollywood. And when you finally get there, you realize that all the people around you are the people that hate you and beat you down in the first place. So that will make anyone angry. And in this case, the anger turns into a revolution. And the examples of people that I drew inspiration from were Christ and Kennedy and John Lennon, because they were all people who tried to change the world.
Yeah.
And you find out, you know, you can only really change yourself. But in this case, and with what I tried to say on Mechanical Animals, was that the revolution not only doesn't work, it becomes turned inside out and made into a product.
Yeah.
And that happened in my real life. A lot of people wanted to take what was important to me and make it into something commercial, something just to sell.
Yeah.
And then I've come full circle back to where my dream started, and I'm faced with the choice of whether I let that destroy me or I destroy everything I've become and, you know, resurrect myself as something different.
Yeah.
And by finishing all 3 records, that's what I did.
Yeah.
So.
And do you think people didn't quite get the humor on the last album?
Well, it's complicated because I think people will understand it more now in the context of the 3. But I was trying to, on 7 songs, make a satire of what I thought people wanted to make me into.
Yeah.
So in a way I was predicting what they wanted to make me.
Yeah.
And I was referencing popular music. I was making fun of pop music in a sense. And the other 7 songs on the record were more about the real isolation and emotional pain that happens when something that's important to you becomes exploited. So it was a complicated record to understand.
Yeah, well, and the humor is quite complicated, obviously, because it's not that obvious.
Because I'm a cynical bastard.
Yeah. And would you say that there's humor in the new album?
There's some irony.
Yeah.
For example, the love song. I started with just a simple title, and I wanted to make that something ironic. And what I made it was almost an Oedipus story. I wanted to write a song about. I had this idea of a metaphor that the hand was the father, that a gun was the mother, and that the bullet were children.
Yeah.
And parents are very responsible where that bullet lands. And I also combine that with a bumper sticker that you see quite often on pickup trucks in the Midwest of America that says, you know, guns, God, and government. And I thought those really don't go together. And so it became, that's about as humorous as I got on the record. So.
Well, it's enough.
Yeah.
And do you think sort of humor is very important to sort of transport statements, or do you think everybody could do without?
You can never take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
Or you become self-parody.
Yeah.
Without knowing it.
Yeah. Okay, and so if I fast forward with Marilyn Manson in the Kirche, I have heard rumors that you want to make a film and a book to the new album. Is that true?
Well, I wrote a book which is called Hollywood, and it tells the story that I described to you earlier about how the three records tie together in a much more detailed, traditional novel, and with characters. And the book itself can stand on its own if you've never listened to the music, but if you read the book with the records in mind, it gives you kind of a greater understanding of what I was thinking when I wrote the songs.
Yeah.
But I put the idea of the film on the back burner because too many people wanted it to be much more commercial than I was looking for. Okay. So I'd rather that the story was told first, and if it becomes a film, that's fine. There is a disadvantage to movies, though. I love film, but if you show somebody something, it's only one vision.
Yeah.
The person who creates it. But with a book, you know, people see it in their head, and
world. Yeah.
I think it's more imaginative.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be my next question. What do you think is stronger, music or films or books?
Well, I tend to think about all three at the same time whenever I'm doing something.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to separate them.
Yeah.
But I think that books obviously came first, and I think that they've lasted, and I think it's important that people don't get too lazy and that they continue to search for knowledge.
Yeah.
Reading.
That's God knocking, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. Disturbing our interview. You also made the last video for 9 Inch Nails, directed it. Mm-hmm. Would you describe yourself as a film buff?
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot of different things that I have plans. I started an entertainment company to have another outlet. I have a record company which I signed a band called Godhead, which will be coming out soon. And I've also have a television show that I'm trying to develop that's a psychological thriller. And I plan on making a film with Alejandro Jodorowsky next summer, if things work out. He's my favorite director, so I was fortunate to meet him.
Yeah. What would you say are your sort of favorite films? What genre is it?
Well, my favorite director's Luis Buñuel, one of my favorite films, which is about a nun. It's called Veridiana. I think it's still, after all these years, holds up. You know, I like the classics, Hitchcock, and sometimes I like Cary Grant.
Yeah.
So, you know, but recently I like American Psycho. I thought that was an interesting interpretation of the book. It made me laugh a lot.
Yeah, I think lots of blood was missing, wasn't there?
A little bit. Could have used a little more violence.
Yes, yeah, a bit more. disgusting bits. Yeah. And can you sort of think of a film that comes close to being an equivalent to your music?
Well, some of Jodorowsky's films, El Topo and Santa Sangre and Holy Mountain, were all very inspirational to me throughout the years. So when I met him, he seems to think that I'm a lot like he was when he was my age, because he's 70 now. But so I suppose his would be the thing that comes closest, because it's very, very imaginative, filled with a lot of symbolism.
Yeah. And what about David Lynch? Would you compare that to your music?
Some of them, some films.
Because he sort of always, it's always about sort of the dark side of the United States and things like that. Is exactly like your music.
The dark side of American culture too.
Yeah.
The only reason that I wouldn't compare him is I have a hard time finding as much symbolism in his work.
Yeah.
It's much more about tension and characters, but I like films with symbolism.
Yeah.
Even Willy Wonka, I think, would probably be my favorite film because it's much darker than people think.
Yeah. Okay. See you in a few minutes with Marilyn Manson and Charlotte Roche. And back to Fast Forward with Charlotte and Marilyn Manson. You recently did a cover version for the soundtrack for the Blair Witch Project Part 2. And their song is called Suicide is Painless, written by Johnny Mandel and Robert Altman. And why did you exactly choose that song?
When we were working on the new album, I was covering a couple different songs just to, I guess, find inspiration. And that song in particular was interesting to me because on the television show, MASH, they removed the lyrics because they were too depressing. But in the film itself, they existed, and when I went back and listened to it, particularly because people were causing such a fuss about my lyrics, I found it to be, in some ways, much more dark and offensive than anything I've done. So I thought it would be, interesting to cover it. I also, did a cover of Working Class Hero by John Lennon, 5 to 1 by The Doors, and I'm Leaving It All Up to You by Dale and Grace, which was #1 the day Kennedy was assassinated, so it was just for a symbolic reason.
Yeah. And what do you think about these bands, these really popular bands in the United States at the moment that call themselves the alternative to mainstream, like Korn, Limp Bizkit, Kid Rock, which I would call absolute pop music?
I don't consider them competition. I consider them something that will probably not stand the test of time in most cases. Some of it, I like a little bit, but I think it's very fashionable to play heavy music now, so it was a challenge for me to make a record that had a little more thought into it, because some of those bands sounded a lot like party music or jock rock or something like that. And I don't think that's something I've ever liked in rock and roll. It's kind of a contradiction in a way that's annoying.
And what comes to your mind when you hear the word pop?
Well, in Ohio, where I grew up, pop is what they call soft drink. But I think pop music is a good place to be subversive. So whenever I write a song and it becomes something played on the radio, it's my way of, it's a bit of a trick for me. It's a prank, because I'm singing things that you wouldn't normally find in a pop song. So people are humming along to something that's quite subversive in a way.
And they don't know what they're singing.
Yes.
And suddenly they realize that.
And then they're captured by the forces of evil.
Yes, and they can't stop singing it at night. and do you feel offended nowadays by these rude attacks on you and your work by either, well, call it society, or if it's on an official basis or private basis? Do you feel offended, or don't you care anymore?
No, I think that there's two levels to what I do. There's the artistic level, which is meant to reach people who are open-minded and enjoy things like music. And then there's the provocative level that's meant to piss people off. So the people that attack me are usually doing it because, in a sense, I'm telling them to. And they're so dumb. They're just really doing what I want them to do. Yeah. So I'm not offended by it. I'm usually entertained by it. Yeah.
And at the moment in the United States, people are sort of allowed to elect a new president. You can choose between two people. It's Mr. Bush, the mass murderer, or Al Gore. And what do you think about this thing happening at the moment?
Well, both of them have spoken out about hating me, so...
Well,
so either way, I can't win, but I don't vote because I don't believe that it's a legitimate system anymore, or if it ever was. So I just try and insert my beliefs in politics into music, you know, because I think that speaks to the youth, which will be the future.
Yeah.
You know, the old people are too afraid to think of new things. So they're gonna, you know, pick the old tigers, whatever you like to call them.
Now, what do you think of this theory that it's maybe good to have Bush winning so that the people wake up? So because that is everybody will realize that is really terrible? Or don't you think they will realize?
If Bush wins, for me, he's obviously the type of person that stands against things like Marilyn Manson because he's a conservative and, you know, pretends to be religious or something of that nature. But on the other hand, the Democrats have taken this stance against entertainment. So it's really hard to tell who's lying the best, and I'm not sure. I obviously really don't believe either. So.
Yeah, but do you think you have to be more afraid or whatever when Bush wins, maybe?
No, I don't think that. They're really just figureheads. I don't think they just do a lot of talking to get elected, and once they're there, they just sleep with their secretaries.
Okay.
That's about it.
and this is the final question, I'm afraid. Have you got any touring plans for Germany for the new album?
Yes, our tour in America starts just in a few weeks, and we'll be coming here after the first of the year.
Oh, super.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manson.
Right. Yeah.